Today, this video is all about pre-fatiguing muscles and whether or not pre-fatiguing muscles is actually a good or it's probably a bad thing to do if your goal is to effectively recruit this muscle. I think it's important to define or lay out the discrepancy between low-level pre-activation, which is a stupid term and I don't like using it, but I'm going to, for lack of a better term, pre-quote-unquote activation drills versus pre-fatigue drills. So pre-activation drills are usually done at quite a low perceived rate of exertion, and they're usually done to help the trainee or client or yourself feel the target muscle, whereas pre-fatigue drills are put in place in order to pre-fatigue that target muscle for the heavier weights to come. So a pre-fatigue set would look something like leg extension to failure, and then you've got, let's say, leg press to failure. I think it'd be really silly to do squats after failing on leg extension, just because if your quads give out, your lower back is probably going to cop the brunt of the load, but I'll explain more about that later on in the video with reference to some pretty awesome research. So as I just mentioned, the term activation I use loosely, and I use because everybody else uses it, and everyone's starting to know that 400 clams at the start of your session usually means you're recruiting the side of your butt. However, the term activation is a little misleading because unless there is some sort of nerve damage, all muscles will undergo, in general, I don't like to speak in absolutes, so generally muscles will be active throughout the entirety of a movement. Whether you can feel them or not is a totally different thing. I guess you could say I use pre-activation drills so I can establish more of a connection, a mind-muscle connection with that target muscle, but then I'd also contend that that term is a little weird too. So I do usually tell people that I use these terms for lack of a better one. But for the moment, just understand that unless your nerves are severed entirely, you're gonna activate your muscles. So I think it's important to understand why a lot of bodybuilders would use pre-fatigue sets in order to generate hypertrophy. I'd argue that it's counterintuitive, but I'll get more to that later on in the video. For now, understand that a lot of bodybuilders use pre-fatigue sets in order to facilitate that pump and burn feel. I could make the case for that utilization of pre-fatigue sets because that pump and burn feel is usually indicative of metabolic stress and therein muscle damage, and those two pathways are significant contributors to the development of hypertrophy. However, when we look at the significant and meaningful research, muscle activity tends to be lower along with the amount of reps you can perform after your muscles have been pre-fatigued. Another study suggested that there was no significant difference between groups who did pre-fatiguing exercises versus groups who rest. I'd contend that resting would actually facilitate increases in hypertrophy more so than the pre-fatigue group. I think the most interesting study to come out of all these studies is there is a study that suggests that pre-fatiguing the target muscle actually decreases the level of activation in that target muscle. So let's say you go ahead and do leg extension and then squats, there is a very good chance to failure, of course. If you leg extend to failure and then you go ahead and do back squats, there's a good chance that your lower back is going to take the brunt of that load because your quads aren't going to be as active throughout the movement because they're fatigued. So research is one thing, but from my experience, I'd also contend that perhaps pre-fatiguing muscles is a pretty stupid idea if you're trying to maximize the amount of force you can produce. This is probably because pre-fatiguing, or the term fatiguing in and of itself, really does refer to a buildup of metabolites which compromise the amount of force you can potentially produce during the lift. Yes, you can argue that lifting heavy is not the be-all, end-all of getting bigger, but I'd argue that if you're fatiguing yourself before going in and trying to get as much volume in as you can with a heavy load to apply sufficient mechanical tension to your frame, then you're going to compromise the amount of volume you can produce, and thus the amount of hypertrophy you're going to get. There's also the important point of an intensity threshold that needs to be considered when programming for hypertrophy. If you could just grow by doing 1 bajillion reps with a bloody apple, curling the apple over and over again until your biceps were the size of the freaking Death Star, then maybe I'd see the utilization of pre-fatiguing sets to be effective. However, they're clearly not, because apples don't make you jacked. So, I'm not going to sit here and say that a lot of like that finisher type stuff is pretty stupid, because as I said before, and as I've said in a bunch of other videos, muscle damage and that metabolite accumulation are two important factors for hypertrophy. So incorporating some sort of metabolite accumulation work within your meso or macro cycles is an appropriate programming tool to use. With these metabolite accumulation finishes, or these just finishes in general, I'd suggest doing anywhere from 12 all the way up to 20 reps. So this is probably going to be a short video, but I really hope you enjoyed it, and I really hope you took some stuff away from this video. Do you do pre-fatigue sets? If you do, justify why below, or don't. Or just tell me, I do pre-fatigue sets, and I'm bigger than you, so f*** you, Michael. And I'm alright with that. You can do that, and I probably won't care, because it's the internet, and I just don't care. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave you now, and if you've been watching this in the toilet, you've probably had about a 3.5 minute shit, and your parents are probably missing you. So thank you very much, and I'll speak to you next time.